Cadet Lieutenant Hoyt, Company Commander of Washington High School Navy Junior ROTC Unit. I would be serving as your Master of Ceremony. Welcome everyone, especially to our veterans. To the Hatchet House for our Veterans Day celebration. Please stand for our national anthem and remain standing through our invocation. Parade the colors. Cadet Ensign Brianna LaFortune, Company Chaplain, will now present our invocation.
Good morning. Please bow your head and pray. Today, God, we give you thanks for all who serve our country. We honor them for their faithful service in defending and preserving our freedom. We are grateful to those who serve during the times of peace, standing ready, bravely awaiting their call to duty. We are grateful to those who serve during the times of unrest, enduring conflict, and bearing physical and spiritual wounds of war. We ask that you bless them, heal their wounds, and give them peace. We thank God for all of our veterans, those of generation past and present. May we never forget our country has asked of them and what they have given in return. When all of us gather here, we ask your favor, Lord. May we enjoy the peace that passes all understanding and is only found in you. Through our Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
It is now my honor and privilege to introduce our principal here at Washington High School, Mr. Brian Holland.
Okay, today I read to you the proclamation of Veterans Day set forth by our current president. Today, we honor generations of American veterans, patriots who have stood on the front lines of freedom and kept the light of liberty shining bright around the world. Just as they have kept the ultimate faith in our nation, we must keep the ultimate faith in them. Each one of our nation's veterans is a link of a chain of honor that stretches back to our founding days, bound by a sacred oath to support and defend the United States of America. Throughout history, whenever and wherever the forces of darkness have sought to extinguish the flame of freedom, America's veterans have been fighting to keep it burning bright. We owe them a debt of gratitude we can never fully repay, not just for fighting for our democracy, but for giving back to our communities and inspiring the next generation to serve, even after they hang up their uniforms. As a nation, we have one truly sacred obligation: to prepare and equip those who sent into harm's way and to care for them and their families when they return home. Since President Biden has come into office, he has signed more than 34 bipartisan laws to support our veterans and their families, caregivers, and survivors. That includes a landmark Sergeant First Class Health Robinson honoring our promise to address Comprehensive Toxic Act, which is better known as the PACT Act, which enacted the most significant expansion of benefits and services for veterans exposed to toxins in more than 30 years. Today, more than 1.1 million veterans and 11,000 survivors of deceased veterans are now receiving new service-connected disability benefits, and over 5.8 million veterans have been screened for toxic exposure, a critical step to ensuring that they get access to the care they need. As of last March, any exposed veteran who served during any conflict outlined in the PACT Act will be able to enroll in the Department of Veterans Affairs, known as the VA, healthcare. The administration is ensuring that women veterans enrolled in the Department of Veterans Affairs healthcare have equitable access to benefits and health services. The administration has worked to reduce barriers and reach out to veterans to make sure they can access their earned benefits. As a result, the VA is delivering more benefits to more veterans than ever before. In 2024, the VA processed more claims than ever and is providing record-level health care services. They have taken steps to eliminate barriers and disparities for all veterans, including people of color, the LGBTQ people, and women. We have made progress in addressing veterans' homelessness and working to end the silent scourge of suicide by addressing financial and legal risk factors, promoting secure storage of firearms, and expanding access to mental health services. Last year, the VA housed nearly 48,000 veterans, expanded access to health care and legal assistance for homelessness veterans, and helped more than 158,000 veterans and their families keep their homes. And we are committed to assisting the roughly 200,000 service members who transition from the military each year with finding good paying jobs, including by connecting them with registered apprenticeship programs. The administration has also prioritized supporting veteran entrepreneurship. This year, service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses secured almost $32 billion in federal contracts, nearly $4 billion more than the prior year. While our veterans are the steel pine of this nation, their families are the courageous heart. They also serve and sacrifice so much for our country. Last year, an executive order was signed calling for the most comprehensive set of administrative actions in our nation's history to support the economic security of military and veteran spouses, caregivers, and survivors. The executive order increases training and employment opportunities for military spouses in the workforce and encourages federal agencies to do more to retain military and veteran spouses through flexible policies. Additionally, through the First Lady's Joining Forces initiative, the administration is working to better support military and veteran families on everything from making school transitions easier for military children to expanding economic opportunities and improving well-being for military spouses, caregivers, and survivors. Earlier this year, the President had the opportunity to visit Normandy to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day alongside so many World War II veterans. Their service and sacrifice helped free the world from tyranny. We learned then what we still know now. Democracy is never guaranteed. Every generation must preserve it, defend it, and fight for it. Today, we honor all veterans who have persevered, defended, and fought for our democracy. They prove that we are a nation that can meet the darkness with light again and again, no matter how high the cost or how heavy the burden. May we all strive to be worthy of their sacrifices for us, doing our part to keep the light of liberty burning bright for generations to come. In respect and recognition of the contributions our veterans and their families, caregivers, and survivors have made the cause of peace and freedom around the world, Congress has provided that November 11th of each year shall be set aside as a legal public holiday to honor our nation's veterans. So therefore, President Joseph R. Biden, President of the United States, hereby proclaims November 11th, 2024 as Veterans Day. It is encouraged that all Americans recognize the valor, courage, and sacrifices of these patriots through appropriate ceremonies and private prayers and by observing 2 minutes of silence for our nation's veterans. It is also called upon federal, state, and local officials to display the flag of the United States of America and to participate in patriotic activities in their community. Thank you.
It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Dr. Matthew Thompson, Lieutenant Colonel, retired U.S. Army. Dr. Thompson enlisted in the U.S. Army Reserve in 2003 as a military police officer while attending Purdue University and commissioned as a second lieutenant in 2006. Dr. Thompson went into law enforcement working for the West Lafayette Police Department and served in the U.S. Army Reserve as Company Executive Officer for the 329th Infantry Regiment. His follow-on assignment included Company Commander for the 384th Military Police Battalion. In 2012, he transitioned to active duty, where he served as Force Protection Officer for the 103rd Expeditionary Sustainment Command, Operations Officer for the 300th Military Police Brigade, Battalion Executive Officer for the 159th Military Police Battalion, and Inspector General for the 100th Training Division. Dr. Thompson left active duty in 2022, returning to the U.S. Army Reserve. He retired in 2023 as a Lieutenant Colonel after 20 years of service. Dr. Thompson's educational accomplishments include the U.S. Army Military Police Basic Officer Leaders Course, U.S. Army's Military Police Captain's Career Course, and the U.S. Army's Command and General Staff Officer Course. Dr. Thompson earned a bachelor's degree in Law and Society from Purdue University, a master's degree in Business and Organizational Security Management from Webster University, and an Organizational Security Management, a doctoral degree in Strategic Leadership from Liberty University. His military education, Dr. Thompson works in Program Manager for Reliable Microsystems. He is married to Mrs. Timmy Thompson and share 3 children, Rocky, Haley, and Duke. Please welcome Dr. Matthew Thompson.
Hey, good morning, everyone. All right. First, I want to take this opportunity to thank all my fellow veterans for their service, as well as the faculty and students for inviting me here today. So thank you very much, everyone. It's a great honor to be here. I'm humbled by the fact that I have this opportunity to stand here and speak to you for the next few minutes. I want to talk to you about service today, but first, I want to start with a quick history lesson about the origins of Veterans Day. From 1914 to 1918, World War I ravaged Europe, leaving somewhere between 15 and 30 million people dead. And according to some historians, it marked the birth of what we consider modern warfare today. We saw the first appearance of tanks on the battlefield. The concept of air superiority was established, and even though submarines had been used back as far as 1776, World War I was the first time they were used in any significant numbers or had any real strategic impact. But for most of the soldiers fighting in Europe, the war meant one thing: trench warfare. At the time, tactical doctrine had not caught up to technological advances. Weapon systems like the Lewis gun, it's a British machine gun, and improvements to the wide range of artillery pieces made sweeping movements like the ones we used in the American Civil War obsolete. Leaders were fighting with the 19th century tactics but using 20th century technology, the results of which were long stalemates and entrenched soldiers. Living conditions were described as a living hell. Life in the trench was characterized by constant fear of bombardment, poor sanitation, mud, rats, and lice. But after the Soviet Revolution in Russia and its subsequent withdrawal from the war, and the United States' decision to enter the war, it came to an end. The Central Powers were defeated. World War I ended November 11th, 1918. And a year later, on November 11th, 1919, Woodrow Wilson proclaimed the day Armistice Day to honor those who died in the war and to recognize the service and sacrifice of those who fought. 1947, following World War II, a movement started to recognize all veterans on Armistice Day, and in 1954, Congress passed a bill to officially recognize the day as Veterans Day. Back in 1919, though, on that first Armistice Day, President Wilson made a speech to the nation, and I'd like to read a snippet of it here for you. He said, "Out of this victory, there arose new possibilities of political freedom and economic concert. The war showed us the strength of great nations, acting together for high purposes, and the victory of arms foretells the enduring conquest which can be made in peace when nations act justly and in furtherance of common interest to men." There's 2 points from that quote that I really want you guys to grab onto. The acting together for high purposes and in furtherance of common interest to men. Not everyone will serve in the military, and that's okay. The military is not for everyone. But everyone can serve. The Bible says in 1 Peter that each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others. This type of service, the service to others, the service to a greater good, is what will drive our country, our state, and our community forward. All too often today, we get caught up in what's happening in our little digital world. The social media and 24-hour news cycles stream a constant feed of garbage to our phones and TVs based on what some algorithms think we want to see. I'm here to tell you the world does not exist in your hand, and we don't need any more keyboard warriors out there. The world is out there, it surrounds you, and if you want to be part of it in any type of meaningful way, you have to get out and live in it. What we need, what our country needs, are people who will step forward and say, "I will serve. I will serve with a higher purpose and for a common good." That service can absolutely be military service. The military is a great way to serve your country and learn valuable life skills. It's going to be the most frustrating, yet somehow rewarding experience of your life. You'll learn the deep meaning of sayings like mandatory fun, being voluntold, embrace the suck, and a few others that would probably get me in trouble if I uttered them here in front of a large group of high school students. I would absolutely support anyone who wants to take that path, because despite all the time away from home, doing things I didn't always want to do, and sometimes seriously questioning my life choices, it was an absolute honor to serve, and I'll proudly stand next to any veteran because I know the sacrifices he or she made in service to something greater than themselves. But if you can't serve in the military, it doesn't mean that you can't find a way to serve. Every single person in this room has gifts, something you're good at, and it's probably something you enjoy doing. Look for ways to use those gifts and serve others. Indiana alone has more than 42,000 nonprofit organizations. Find one that aligns with something you're passionate about and ask how you can help. And if you want to give back to your local veterans, reach out to the local VFW, American Legion, or Disabled American Veterans Group and see how you can help. There's a gentleman I know who has helped organize several mission trips for his church. We meet together on Wednesday nights for Bible study. On one occasion, he was approached by an elderly woman. She's probably in her 80s. who wanted to go on a mission trip and help with disaster relief down south, but didn't know what she could do because she couldn't physically help the rest of the team. He asked her, "Can you sit? Can you listen? Can you pray?" And of course she said yes, and that's exactly what she did. She went on the mission trip, she sat in the cafeteria, she listened to people who needed it, and she prayed with them. That was it. She was there to help comfort those in need and be the kind of person who is willing to listen to them in their hour of need. So what I would ask you to do today is look for ways you can serve. Don't get lost in the constant barrage of algorithm-driven media being forced on you every day. Go out into the world and be that kind of person that someone else needs you to be. I'll leave you with a quote from a wise man. He once said, "Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to do it." So, thank you very much for your time today. God bless you. God bless the United States.
Please welcome Company Executive Officer Lieutenant Angel Victoria Sirocco, who will conduct our Veterans Roll Call.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of all veterans who have served and those currently serving, I say thank you for taking the time to honor them today. I will read the following names of current active duty members of the Armed Forces and veterans' names who were submitted by families, friends, and relatives from our local community. The ship's bell will toll at the end, honoring those vets who are dearly departed but not forgotten. Melvin Abel, U.S. Army. Olivia Alves, U.S. Air Force. James Austin, U.S. Navy. James Barnes, U.S. Navy. Scott Babb, U.S. Army. Robert Bowe, World War II. Robert Baxter, U.S. Army. Arnold Benton, U.S. Army. David Bodger, U.S. Army. U.S. Navy. Croydon Bowers, U.S. Army. Jerry Burks, U.S. Army. Richard Burks, U.S. Army. Chris Butcher, U.S. Navy. Gordon Charlie, U.S. Army. Donald Clark, U.S. Army. David Coleman, U.S. Navy. Harlan Council, U.S. Army. Holland John, U.S. Army. Vincent Dietz, U.S. Air Force. Glenn Bud Duncan, U.S. Navy. Zach Edwards, U.S. Marine Corps. Darrell Irwin, U.S. Navy. Jim Fleetwood, U.S. Army. James Gaynor, U.S. Navy. Kurt Gates, U.S. Marine Corps. Ivan Goodwin, U.S. Army. Aaron Gibbs, U.S. Navy. Dimple I. Gray, U.S. Navy. Kelly Ham, U.S. Air Force. Joseph Hawkins, U.S. Navy. Troy Hetty, U.S. Marine Corps. Rhonda Heisdorf, U.S. Navy. Kevin Heisdorf, U.S. Navy. Ronald Helms, U.S. Navy. Wesley Hughes, U.S. Air Force. Daniel James, U.S. Army. Roy Jones, U.S. Army. Justin Jones, U.S. Army. Avery Jones, U.S. Marine Corps. Nathan Kavanaugh, U.S. Army. Ed Kearns. John E. Lagle, U.S. Marine Corps. Lawrence Lemaire, U.S. Air Force. Tommy Lancaster, U.S. Army. Arnold Lang, U.S. Army. Roger Lynn, U.S. Navy. Tristan Logson, U.S. Navy. Sean Merrick, U.S. Navy. Alex Mattingly, Army National Guard. Andrew Mattingly, U.S. Army. Odell Moore, U.S. Army. Jim Moore, U.S. Marine Corps. Ashlyn Morris, U.S. Army. Alex Myers, U.S. Marine Corps. Justin Neal, U.S. Air Force. Robert S. Osmond, U.S. Army. Robert Otten, U.S. Army. James Pitcock, U.S. Army. Locke Red, U.S. Army. Jopesh Rell, U.S. Navy. Barry Reister, U.S. Navy. Michaela Richardson, U.S. Navy. James Richardson, U.S. Army. William Rumpel, U.S. Air Force. Stanley Salmon, United States Army. Jasmine Sells, Army National Guard. Leland Snar, U.S. Army. Joseph Schulteis, U.S. Army. Jason Smith, U.S. Navy. George Laverne Stevenson, U.S. Navy. Art Stoner, U.S. Army. Max Stowers, U.S. Air Force. Andrew Street, U.S. Army. Delmar Street, U.S. Air Force. Edgar Luther Street, U.S. Army. John Tabor, U.S. Army. Jim Tedlock, U.S. Army. Ernest Thompson, United States Army. John Thurston, U.S. Army. Lewis Turner, U.S. Army. Dan Van Loo, U.S. Air Force. Mike Van Loo, U.S. Army. Jose Victoria Rodriguez, Army. Lloyd Dale Wagner, U.S. Army. Richard Walker, U.S. Army.